And this is why you should never leave your car unlocked in the parking lot at work. Now, if you're the type of person that does this, nothing is gonna stop you until something like what I'm about to tell you happens. So it's midnight shift at the psych ward, and earlier in that day, a patient had been discharged. They stayed the maximum amount of days allowed, and the patient also happened to be homeless. And because you can't discharge a patient to the streets because you'll be liable for if something happens to them, the hospital was scrambling in order to find some shelter or anything to discharge him. But that was the problem. They've been scrambling for like a week, and all of the shelters were filled up, and he didn't have any family to go to. So anyways, they're trying every way they can to stop him from using hospital resources, which, side note, why do some of you nurses care about hospital resources that you have nothing to do with? Some of you nurses need to prioritize patient care and stop acting like finding a shelter or a shitty group home is the Lord's work, because it isn't. So the patient could hear the nurses complaining about how he's exhausting resources and they don't have any more days for him, all this stuff. And he's just sitting there silently. He just wanted his 3 hots and a cot. Not to mention it's winter time. So a lot of the homeless population realize that psych wards are a resource for them. If they go to the ER and say, I feel like unaliving myself, then you might buy yourself some time off of the cold streets. So they discharged him, right? With bus tickets to a shelter that maybe would have 3 spots by the time he got there. They were too cheap to actually give him an Uber or Lyft directly to the shelter. He had to take a bus, and he would be getting on connecting stops. He had said he'd never taken a bus that had connecting stops, so you could already tell he had given up, and his face was just nodding and letting the social workers and nurses say their spiel. He didn't even have a phone to confirm when he gets to the shelter. So yes, they did essentially discharge him to the streets, but he didn't end up making it far later, we ended up finding out. A midnight staff decided to take their lunch break at an open late restaurant down the street. So they get into their car, they're driving down the road, and when they pull into the parking lot and shut off their car, they hear heavy breathing, sounding like snoring. She turns around and she sees this man curled up in her back seat. Obviously, she loses her shit. She gets out of the car, she's hollering, screaming, and she calls the police. She didn't know that it was the patient that was discharged earlier that day. So he was brought back to the hospital's ER as they tried to find a new hospital for him to be transferred to. So law enforcement had brought him back to the ER in cuffs, and after speaking to the hospital staff, they ask, do you want to press charges? To which she answers, yes.